Hello, world, and welcome to the Shannon Joy Show. We're broadcasting live from the Joy Virtual Studio right here in the beautiful Finger Lakes region of New York State. It is so good to be with all of you today. It is Monday, January 20th, Inauguration Day. Everyone is talking about it. The pomp and the circumstance is worthy of, a royal coronation from all of the concerts and the videos and the intrigue from last night. Donald Trump is being inaugurated today as I speak to you live right now. And we're going to be talking about the news of the day and also welcoming into the Joy Virtual Studio a brand new guest, but an old friend of the Shannon Joy Show. Debbie Lerman will be with us in just a moment to talk about her blockbuster piece exposing the Means twins, Callie and Casey Means. Today's show is about government actors infiltrating freedom movements for the purpose of distraction, dissembling, and ultimately destruction. And we're going to go all the way back to the 60s. We're going to talk about present day movements like the Tea Party, the resistance to lockdowns, and the infiltration of these movements by what many believe are potentially CIA operatives, actors, assets, you name it. An amazing researcher, and we're going to introduce you to Debbie Lerman in just a moment today on the Shannon Joy Show. Of course, we're going to talk about some of the intrigue of the day and the inauguration, the dropping of the Trump meme, the Melania meme, the crypto coins that has everyone talking, netted about $21 billion for Trump literally overnight. We have some statements from trusted sources about that we will get to today. And we're just going to lay it all down on the kitchen table today on the Shannon Joy Show. We're live on Rumble, live on Twitter, Spreely TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, of course. The Shannon Joy Show is uploaded and broadcast via audio on all the podcast platforms you can ever imagine. We're thankful for our collaboration with Daily Clout and Clout Hub, and of course, our friends over at Patriot TV, now rebroadcasting the Shannon Joy Show every day, Monday through Friday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, adding about an additional million viewers per month, which is absolutely amazing. This network, the independent Shannon Joy Network, now reaching over 1 million eyes and ears every single month. And we built it ourselves. We did it independently. I did it with all of you, and I can't thank you enough for your support. If you want to support this independent network, please go to theshannonjoy.com. That is my independent website. It's the hub for everything. You can sign up for my daily e-newsletter where I tell you exactly what we're going to be talking about each day on every show. You can also access my email and also support financially this independent network. You just click up in the right-hand corner and set up your monthly support subscription. And we appreciate all of you. We could not do this without you. And so it's super exciting today to announce the joining of Annie, who is the new producer for the Shannon Joy Show. She is Annie Inez Cyrus. And Annie, I don't know if you want to say hello to everyone, but if you guys are wondering why we started on time today, why we have the lowers and the uppers and the logo and everything just seems to be flowing so beautifully, it's because of the beautiful Annie Cyrus, who is now going to be the daily producer. Annie, how are you?
I am excited. I'm very excited. I get to help with the perfect show of the Shannon Joy. I get
Oh
to
my,
watch it all.
yeah. It's amazing. I feel like half of my brain is now freed up. Now that I don't have to push the buttons, and I know you guys love when I mess up the show and when I forget to turn my mic on or I run the wrong thing or I have all of these terrible technical difficulties and you guys get a kick out of it, but not anymore because I have the genius Annie behind the scenes and she's making everything happen. And today has just been so beautiful. And I'm looking at the live chat right now. Guitar Lily saying hello to Annie, Beachhawk 874 saying hi, Annie, and welcome. We have CJP Rumble. We have Vidana on the live chat. And yes, I know everyone is talking about the inauguration. It's a little bit nauseating, especially when you're from my corner and you're kind of like, hey, meet the new boss, same as the old boss, maybe worse than the old boss, given what we are going to be focusing on and what we're going to be seeing come from the tech bros in 2025. In fact, I just got an email from Catherine Austin Fitz warning, 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 digital ID is going to be the number one agenda of the Trump administration. It's likely a payback kind of thing for the help that he got from Elon Musk and the tech bros in winning the election in the first place. And that's just how politics goes. So we're going to have a lot to go over in the next 12 months. There is going to be, massive deception, propaganda. I think we're in the middle of the Omni War, which is what Catherine Austin Fitts described in so many of her writings. So you guys look fantastic on the live chat. It is great to see you. And we also want to thank our sponsors. So thank you to Colonial Metals Group. You're going to hear from them today. Our friends over at the Satellite Phone Store, sat123.com/joy. When you use the Joy promo code, 10% off of everything at the Satellite Phone Store website. And let me tell you, the generators and the solar panels and the Faraday equipment, they have everything that you need when the lights go out. And we are looking now, I don't know if you guys saw, I don't know if any of you are from North Carolina, but right now it is, below zero temperatures in North Carolina. It's freezing here in Rochester, New York, but upstate, in these northern countries, we're used to this. Below temperature or below zero temperatures in North Carolina. And some people are talking about rolling blackouts. So people are not able to heat their homes in some areas in North Carolina, which is absolutely devastating, especially the people who were in the path of the recent hurricane, who are struggling to begin with. And so this is why you want to prepare. Folks over at the Satellite Phone Store have everything that you need when you need to prepare. And it's always 10% off. They're even, discounted items with the Joy promo code. So make sure that we're supporting them as well. Also, our friends over at PCM and Associates, PCM Polano, that is Don Polano. He's my financial advisor. If you need a financial advisor that you can trust, that is on your side, right, and that shares your beliefs, I want to introduce you to my trusted advisor. Dom has been with me for, I want to say 15 years, well over. He was the very first sponsor of the Shannon Joy Show 12 years ago, which is amazing. You're going to hear from him as well. So thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to our supporters. Hello to everyone on the live chat. Welcome, Annie. I think we hit everything in terms of the housekeeping for this Monday edition of the Shannon Joy Show. What I think we'll do, Annie, if it's okay with you, let's go to a break. When we come back, we're going to welcome Debbie Lerman into the Joy Virtual Studio. I want to give her the majority of the show. Debbie is an investigative researcher, a prolific writer, and a fellow at Brownstone Institute. And she is going to talk with us today about her explosive new Substack, CIA Central Casting, the Means episode. Who are Casey and Callie Means? And this is this is 21 pages printed out. When I say that she is an amazing researcher, she brings the receipts. This is an important story because in larger context, it is a story about what has happened to freedom movements in the United States of America in recent history, but even dating back into the 60s. And so we're going to get all of that from Debbie today on the Shannon Joy Show. Make sure you keep it tuned right here. Give us a thumbs up right here on Rumble. Join the live chat, and we will be back in a moment to continue this discussion with Debbie Lerman.
Has the dust settled from the COVID policy response? Far from it. The storms are many. Inflation, learning losses, ill health, high crime, broken government services, displaced workers, substance abuse, mass loneliness, discredited science, real estate crisis, censorship, and overweening state power. The world is on fire with war, mass killings, crime, hunger, revolution. The lack of accountability, or even so much as an apology, is a foreshadowing. They'll keep their newfound powers and try it all again. Brownstone Institute is seeking answers, undertaking important research and publishing the results while providing fellowships for dissident scholars who have been professionally displaced. It's not about this one crisis. We urgently need to restore peace, prosperity, and integrity in science and journalism. Visit brownstone.org for more. We may never get to the truth, but we can get closer to the truth. There will be no stopping the efforts.
After a lifetime of hard work and smart investing, The last thing you want to worry about is losing your retirement savings. Hi, I'm Paul Stone, CEO of Colonial Metals Group. We specialize in helping hardworking Americans like you take back control of their financial future, safeguard their savings. In economic times like these, millions turn to physical precious metals as a form of insurance, while conventional investment choices face challenges or even collapse. If you have an IRA, 401k, or other type of retirement account, my team at Colonial Metals Group would like to help you build a financial protection plan outlining the most secure future for you. We've put together a free protection kit showing how you can start investing in precious metals 100% tax and penalty free to protect and grow your wealth. You can download it for free now by clicking the button below. Customers, we're very proud to say, across the country have been very impressed by my team's in-depth knowledge of financial history and their ability to listen to you. We hold the same conservative values you hold and ones our great nation was built on. And we can't wait to start helping you and working with you. Again, just click the button below to download our retirement protection kit for free now.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Shannon Joy Show. It is official. Just a few minutes ago, Donald J. Trump was sworn in as the 47th president of the United States of America. Rumors are already swirling that he didn't even have his hand on the Bible. I saw that on the live chat. We'll keep an eye on all of that today in the Shannon Joy Show. Without further ado, I would like to welcome into the Joy Virtual Studio Debbie Lerman. As I mentioned, she is an investigative journalist, a researcher, a fellow at Brownstone Institute, and her recent piece, CIA Central Casting, the Means episode, is absolutely blockbuster. And we're going to get to that in a moment, Debbie. But first of all, thank you for joining us on the Shannon Joy Show. You have been such a great friend to me over the years. We met at Brownstone events over the years, and man, we share a brain on so many things. Let's start, before we get to your piece, let's start with your thoughts on the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 47th president and the flurry of activity over the past couple of days. I'm going to read to you a statement from David Icke that I thought was pretty interesting, that he put out just a few hours ago. He wrote this, and I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Trump's inauguration day Trump's inauguration day is a time to be highly vigilant and streetwise. You are going to be hit by so many reasons to think that Trump is a hero changing the world. This is a crucial stage one to part of the psyop. But from here on, watch like a hawk the actions of the tech AI oligarchs around him, the AI control and human fusion agenda, deregulation to ease its passage, and the digital currency masquerading as crypto. Watch in general the fundamentals of the Schwab Great Reset presented as setting the people free fall for the Trump, Musk, Vance, Thiel, Sachs AI psyop in the next 4 years, and it's game over. Debbie, that's a big statement, but one that I think encapsulated kind of how I feel moving forward. I don't share the exuberance and the excitement. I'm actually quite concerned. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I agree completely. First, I wanted to say thank you so much for having me, Shannon. It's wonderful to be here,
Of course.
especially on this day because I share your apprehensions and I agree with almost everything in that statement. I don't have the same belief that the transhuman agenda can actually be achieved. I think that's a lot of mumbo jumbo, but I do think that the tech bros and the surveillance and the fake crypto and the digital ID, everything that you said, all of that is absolutely completely what we need to be worried about now and for the next 4 years. I mean, hopefully people will wake up. I don't know, Shannon.
Yeah.
I go from despair to a little bit less despair, but that's about it.
Right. What do you make of the dropping of, and this is, in more of an economic kind of financial issue, but the dropping of the Trump crypto coin and then the Melania meme. I'm sorry, I said $21 billion. I meant $31 billion on paper that
Mm.
Trump literally made overnight. On Igor, I linked this in the show notes today on Igor Chudov's Substack. This is opening up, I mean, so many questions. Is this even legal? And is this potentially a way to funnel money and bribes into Trump's personal coffers outside of, his capacity of president of the United States? And what is up with just making $31 billion overnight? Like, I can't even wrap my mind around this, but it's now almost being normalized, this oligarchical aspect of what is supposed to be a representative government that is transparent and executing the will of the people.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think uh, it was exemplified before the election and during the election period and during the transition period in particular with the tech bros and Elon, because the same thing as the worship of anyone who's a billionaire taking over the government. That's just not how a democracy works. It doesn't matter if you like him, if you think he has great ideas, if you think that he's going to be the second coming, whatever you think, that's still not how we run a democracy, by somebody who is the richest man in the country or in the world taking over and telling us how to run the government. So to me, that was already a sign, one of the many signs,
Right.
that we were on the wrong track.
Yeah. It's just kind of stunning to witness, this turn of events and how quickly people are embracing the public private partnership, the private sector coming in and taking over functions of government. Now, you come from a liberal kind of probably a more progressive beginning. I come from a conservative Republican beginning, and somehow you and I find each other in all this. It's probably why you mentioned a democracy. So many of my liberal friends, and my live chat goes bananas. Everyone is like, this is not how democracy is supposed to work. And everyone in the chat is like, we don't live in a democracy. This is the problem with it. But I think it's kind of knee jerk, right? Because democracy is how we have identified our republic, our constitutional republic for so long. But I think that we are seeing some of the problems with a democracy. If everything is riding on a contest every 2 or 4 years of popular vote, and the popular vote can be manipulated by technology or stolen. In fact, in Trump's speech yesterday in introducing Elon Musk, he even mentioned, Elon came to Pennsylvania and spent a month in Pennsylvania, and he knows all about those voting machines and what to do with those voting machines. And we ended up winning Pennsylvania by a landslide. And I'm like, wait a second.
Don't say that.
Yeah, this is democracy, right? This is probably why our founders and the framers of our Constitution didn't make us a democracy. They made us a constitutional republic with elements of democracy. But what are your thoughts there? I mean, is this evidence that we've kind of just fallen apart? That the republic is broken, and there is no semblance of democracy moving forward?
I think the key is what you said, public-private partnerships.
Yeah.
I really don't like that phrase because it sounds so boring and it makes people just their eyes glaze over, because it sounds like kind of just a very technical term that doesn't really mean anything. But actually, that is the essence of the corruption. Because the reason that I believe that we no longer live in a democratic republic, let's say,
That's good.
is that the public and the private spheres have fused together, and it's not on a national level; it's on a global level. So the other reason I don't think that we're living in a democratic republic is because we are no longer controlled by the people that we supposedly elect. Let's say we even do elect these people. First of all, the people who they are beholden to is not the voters; they are beholden to the people who pay for them to get elected. And the people who pay for them to get elected are the people in the public-private partnerships on the global level. And when I say on the global level, I mean global corporations that include not just like the big pharma, big tech, big agro, big food, but they also include international consulting firms international PR and lobbying firms, even the entertainment industry internationally. So basically, people with power getting
Mhm.
together and figuring out how they're going to run things. And then they do it through the international governing bodies, which is like the WHO and the UN. So it's not like the WHO and the UN are trying to take over the world. It's the people who have the money and the power using that mechanism. And we saw this mostly during COVID. That's when I actually woke up to it because I wasn't even aware of it before.
Right.
So I came to the game late, and
Yeah.
I have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah. We're
And
talking to Debbie Lerman, by the way. Follow her on Substack and all of her writing. Debbie, and there's another piece that I would like to get to today. We are going to talk about CIA central casting, specifically the Means twins, because in real time we are witnessing
yeah,
the takeover of a movement by outside actors, likely intelligence or CIA, and we're watching it happen. And Debbie has done a brilliant job of putting this all together, linking everything. But a previous report that you had done really expose the international component, the international military rollout of the COVID lockdown. It was not just the Department of Defense here in the US, but it was an international organization led from NATO, which I would really like to get to you to you in a moment too, because those are two pieces that I've been really, really anxious to talk to you about. But first, Annie, if you have the piece to Debbie's statement there about the public-private partnerships and the new oligarchs that seem to be controlling our presidents and our elected officials, including the incoming president of the United States of America. Annie, if you could pull up the Bill Gates clip that was making its way across Twitter over the weekend, that is absolutely stunning. If there was one person in the medical freedom movement or the MAHA movement or the anti-lockdown movement or whatever you want to call it, Debbie, if there was one villain, it was Bill Gates, right? That everyone could agree on, the left, the right, as our movement came together. And before Trump even takes office and is inaugurated, you have this statement now coming from Bill Gates, utterly astounding, on Friday of last week. Let's take a look.
Have you met with Donald Trump since the election?
Yeah, I had a chance to go have a long and actually quite intriguing dinner with him.
What did you discuss? What was intriguing?
Well, we touched on a lot of things. It was over 3 hours. To my surprise, it was, just he and I, his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, and the person who helps manage things for me, Larry Cohen. So the four of us sat there, and it was quite wide-ranging. Global health's the area that I work in, and such amazing things have happened and can happen there. I spoke a lot about HIV and that the foundation's literally working on a cure for that. We're at an early stage, and so he, in the COVID days, accelerated the vaccine innovation. So I, was asking him if maybe the same kind of thing could be done here, and we both got, I think, pretty excited about that. We talked about polio, where we're very close to getting that done, but if you stop, it'll spread back. And so I explained why it's been tough in Pakistan, Afghanistan. We've had cases show up in Gaza. We have cases in Africa. And he was fascinated to hear what he could do to maximize the chance that during the next 4 years, that incredible milestone will be achieved. I felt like he was, energized and, looking forward to helping to drive innovation. I was frankly impressed with how well he showed a lot of interest in the issues I brought up.
So the OG tech bro, Bill Gates, 3 hours, super excited, working together, innovation. Debbie Lerman, do you think that we're going to see a prosecution of Bill Gates and justice in the next 4 years of the Trump? I mean, what do you make of that? What do you make of that?
It's so terrifying. It's just terrifying. First of all, did you notice how he was surprised that it was only him. Just surprise! Oh, what a surprise that nobody else was there recording this conversation, and we will never know what they actually talked about. Number two, isn't it great how he accelerated the vaccine during COVID? Let's accelerate everything else. Okay. So let's unleash a whole lot of other garbage on the world and kill and injure a whole bunch more people. And yay, I have Trump on my side for that. Isn't that great?
Right.
Also, I don't think they spent 3 hours talking about AIDS and polio.
I'm
That's just me,
sure.
though.
Isn't it interesting, Debbie, that the first betrayal of Bobby Kennedy Jr., the knife in the back with the twist, actually happened in 2016 or 2017 after Trump was inaugurated. He had a sit down with Bobby Kennedy Jr. and they agreed to work on vaccines together back in the first administration. And subsequently, he had a meeting with Bill Gates, and all of a sudden, Bobby Kennedy Jr. was banished from the island. Okay. He was off the reservation. Bill Gates was in, and here we have, Trump's presidency, and then which culminated in the lockdowns. Is this a signal to, as we transition to our Maha discussion, is this a signal to the Kennedy camp? We also have reporting from, I believe it was, I think Axios reported this, but it's been reported in other places as well, that Aaron Siri has been sidelined. So Aaron Siri, one of the best attorneys for the medical freedom movement, close advisor to RFK Jr., according to reports, has been sidelined, removed from RFK Jr.'s staff. Is this, and now we have this statement about Bill Gates, is this a signal to the medical freedom movement, Maha, and the Bobby Kennedy camp that things are not going to be so smooth in the next 12 months?
I mean, for sure. I think there have been signals way before that. I wasn't aware of what happened in 2016 because I wasn't following back then. So I appreciate that historical reminiscence because it's happening again. Interestingly, the Aaron Siri story could go either way. So it might be true, and I have heard many reports from many former Kennedy close people who say they had worked closely with Kennedy that they're not working closely with him anymore. But I don't know Aaron personally, so I don't know what's really happening. One possibility is that that's just something that they want to be out there in order to make it seem like Bobby Kennedy is no longer associating with all of his anti-vax, I'm putting that in quotes, anti-vax associates. And so that might be a strategy. But whoever strategy it is a strategy to get Bobby Kennedy into a position where he is completely powerless. So I know people think that being in one of these government agencies is going to give him a lot of power and let him do a lot of things. We'll see. I don't think so. And I think that all the signals from the moment that from the moment that he suspended his independent presidential campaign, I knew something was wrong. And I think that was the moment that whatever control somebody has over him or whatever compromises he either wanted or was forced to make, I think from that moment it became clear that the agenda of what I'm going to try to consistently call the medical freedom movement. Maha is a brand. It is not a movement. It is a brand that was sort of slapped onto people like me who were awakened during COVID, and the people who had been doing the work for many years before me and us about vaccines and about the harms of the pharmaceutical industrial complex and the pharmaceutical public-private partnerships, because it was really the agencies and the pharmaceutical companies that have been doing it from the beginning with the vaccines.
Right.
And so Maha was slapped onto us as a brand. It was slapped onto us in order to sort of confuse it with MAGA or kind of blend it in with MAGA, which makes it very political. Okay, so for me, the first sign that somebody's trying to infiltrate and kind of dissipate the energy of the medical freedom movement is when it becomes political. So when people start talking about it as if it's a right wing or a left wing thing, that automatically excludes half of the people who are in it, because we're not partisan. We are all in it. The real people who are really fighting it are in it for the principles and not for any kind of conservative or liberal, because those words barely mean anything anymore. Not any kind of Democratic or Republican or anything like that principles, but actual moral principles,
Right.
and values, and things like just the Hippocratic Oath or the Constitution, things that are nonpartisan. So the minute you slap a partisan label on it, you're already dismantling the energy behind it, because you are making it possible for the other side to say, oh, that's just a conservative thing,
Right.
or that's just a liberal thing. And that takes all the power out of it. And so that immediately raised alarms for me
Yeah.
when it became Maha, and when it became part of MAGA, Maha, Doge, oh, wow, isn't that great? Now we're with the billionaires who are going to cut the federal budget. That's really going to work.
Right. Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk. And we have Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough going down to Mar-a-Lago. You have Chris Cuomo being a lot friendlier to the Trump administration. And this is something, Debbie, that is a little concerning to me. We are not seeing, Time named Donald Trump Man of the Year. That's from Time Magazine, typically a left-leaning liberal publication. Donald Trump is on the cover. He is Man of the Year. And there seems to be a muted response, a muted antagonism coming from left-wing media and even left-wing states, right? We have, interestingly enough, this is fascinating, Andrew Cuomo, former governor of New York State, lead lockdowner, probably one of the worst lockdowners on the face of the planet, joining with Mark Levin, a typical right-wing squawker, right? In this, who's who dream team of attorney and representation, heading over to represent Bibi Netanyahu at The Hague, I believe. In where he's being tried for crimes against humanity. So the most right-leaning merging with the most left-leaning, Donald Trump now negotiating a spot kind of in the middle, right? Where he's flirting with all the leftists that, we've ever opposed here on the right, bringing in this new right, con Inc., conservative Inc., element, and muddling it all together. What are your thoughts on just those two examples? And we'll go to break after this thought, and then we'll come back and get into the body of your work. But what do you think of this? I don't see pushback anywhere, from anyone.
Those are really great examples. I mean, they maybe contradict a little bit what I was saying, because they are muddling the left-right thing themselves,
Right.
although
Yes.
they use the labels for their followers. So I think what we need to realize is that what the followers are told versus what the elites are doing are two very opposite things.
Right.
So of course, in the elite circles, there is no left or right, and there is no Republican, or we know that, right? I mean, Dick Cheney on the left being a champion, that's just one of the craziest things I ever heard.
Right.
And the examples that you gave are also excellent. So that's what's happening up there. But down here, where the media and the propaganda are, we're all being told, oh, it's those extreme right wing, Maha MAGA, so that's where they wrap Maha into MAGA in order to be able to, slap that alt right or whatever kind of label on us. And so I think it's super interesting to see the difference between how they talk and what the propaganda is that they're trying to disseminate in order to keep us all separate and as usual, right? As usual, at each other's throats, whereas they themselves aren't doing that at all. And another really good example is the fact that, Trump was supposed to be Hitler, if you recall.
Right.
And he was supposed to be setting up concentration camps and Handmaid's Tale. I mean, I do have left-wing friends who are so much in the propaganda bubble. One of them actually ended up in the ER on the day that he was elected because of a panic attack, because of the propaganda. That's how bad it was in that bubble.
It's
So
real.
that bubble was told that he was Hitler and that they were going to be shackled and that women weren't going to be allowed to divorce their husbands. I mean, you can't believe what people were saying.
Right.
The minute he's elected, and even before, all of the people who were telling them that are all of a sudden, as you say, going to Mar-a-Lago, representing Trump in all kinds of, international, or representing Netanyahu, even worse.
Right.
And so what are they thinking? I don't know. I don't even know how anybody can sit and watch that and say, wait a minute, they told me he was the second coming of Hitler, and now they're all just buddy buddies. And when he was sitting and laughing with Obama, at
Right.
remember that? Was that at Carter's funeral?
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yep.
yeah.
It's just amazing. You get the sense that all the checkers are in the air, that the checkerboard has been tossed. The checkers are in the air. No one's really rooted to any foundational principles.
Right.
And everything is muddled. And that is the stage that is set. If we're going to get Shakespearean, all the world's a stage. That is the stage that is set as we move into 2025. This is why David Icke is saying we are going to have to be highly vigilant and streetwise, because all the world is a stage. And you get the distinct sense that these are actors, that Donald Trump
Yes.
and Melania and the inauguration and the pomp and the circumstance and Snoop Dogg and the cool 31 bill overnight because of his new meme coin, like all of it, even Elon Musk himself and Bill Gates seem to be playing roles. But when we come back, this is why Debbie Lerman is so important today. And the piece that she wrote, her Substack, is so important because it is in real time an examination of the emergence of actors, of potential CIA assets. In this case, it's the Means twins, Callie and Casey Means, who we've discussed here on the Shannon Joy Show and have been a topic of great discussion as they have been exposed as infiltrating the medical freedom movement, replacing it with MAHA, and completely tearing apart the fabric of what that movement was all about. It was about opposing lockdowns and forced masking and, yes, forced vaccination, the rollout of the toxic shots that was a DoD operation in conjunction with an international military operation led by NATO, which Debbie Lerman has also exposed on her Substack. If you aren't following Debbie on Substack, you need to be following her right now. She is listed right in the show notes. We are going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to get into those two pieces so that you have an understanding of what is coming, streetwise and vigilant. It's all a game. We'll be back in a moment to continue this discussion right here on the Shannon Joy Show.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
I ended up in a wheelchair.
Completely seized up, thought I was stroking, couldn't walk.
Had to relearn how to walk again.
His kidneys are shutting down.
She had 5 Pfizer COVID vaccinations. She never woke up.
This is the life that I have now. It's when you start thinking, okay, how do I end my life?
Something really sinister, really sinister was going on.
These were fundamental violations of human rights.
So we here at Children's Health Defence are going to go back out on the road. We are going to speak to every single one of you. What have you been through?
Those are my eyes. This is a huge tumor.
This is the bottom of my lung that is filled with blood.
They said it was the most aggressive cancer that they've seen.
I held on to my husband for the very last time, and I stayed with him until his body got cold.
I told him that I loved him. Not to be afraid.
What have your children been through COVID? Through all of the issues that we've had over these last few years? We want to hear all of your stories.
It was hard seeing 25-year-olds coming in with heart attacks, with strokes, because they received the vaccine.
The success rate of these patients getting better was next to zero.
There's something wrong. There's something has happened, and you have to consider the vaccine.
This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
You showed up here and you're unvaccinated, you will suffer for having not done what we had to do.
That, to me, was a crime against humanity and a violation of my oath.
We will continue. Children's Health Defence will continue, and we will not stop until there's justice, and this never, ever happens again.
Hey everyone, it's me, Shannon Joy for the Satellite Phone Store. Listen, we all know today's world is freaking crazy, okay? It is unpredictable, and in today's world, you cannot take anything for granted, not even your phone service. When the power's out, when the grid is down, how do you stay connected with your loved ones? Well, the answer is a satellite phone from our friends over at sat123.com. That's sat123.com. Your satellite phone doesn't rely on cell towers or the grid. It works anywhere, anytime, whether you're off grid hiking, on a road trip, or dealing with a storm. You can count on your phone from the Satellite Phone Store to keep you in touch with the people that matter the most. And I love that sat123.com is an American-based company, family-owned. You've met Tina Blanca and the team. They're completely dedicated to quality and reliability, and they get what's important: your safety and peace of mind, your family, because that's what's important to them. So don't wait on the next emergency. Go to sat123.com and use that promo code JOY for 10% off your first order. Be prepared. Stay connected with sat123.com. Welcome back, everyone, to the Shannon Joy Show. And right now at sat123.com/joy, they are giving away a free Faraday bulletproof backpack and a free phone when you sign up for their satellite phone service. So this is the ultimate peace of mind. We just had Tina in the Joy Virtual Studio last week. You guys met her on Friday. Again, this company is amazing. And they are offering, this is a very, very generous gift. I sent my son Jack to college with his bulletproof Faraday backpack. That Faraday pouch not only protects your phone from an EMP attack, but it also protects you from your phone's emissions. Also, it disappears you from the grid. So, and I have one right here. They have every single version of Faraday. I mean, they have the backpacks, they have the pouches. So you put your phone in this pouch and literally you've disappeared from the grid. So if you don't want the government, we're talking about digital ID, we're talking about government surveillance, the drones, the tech bros, all the things. This is a way for you to disappear from the grid. The Faraday backpacks, pouches, bags, they work beautifully. And you can get it all at the Satellite Phone Store website, sat123.com/joy. Again, when you sign up for the satellite phone service, you will get a free Faraday backpack. It is bulletproof and it's like over a $200 value. That in addition to a free phone when you sign up for 1 year of service. So go to sat123.com and it's great for peace of mind. So sat123.com/joy, sat123.com/joy. We're going to bring back into the Joy Virtual Studio our friend Debbie Lerman. You can follow her on her Substack. Is there anywhere else that you activate from, Debbie? You're not active on Twitter. We've been looking for you on Twitter. It's primarily Substack and Brownstone, correct?
Just Substack and Brownstone. Okay. Yeah. I have an ideological objection to all social media.
Girl, I'm going to be joining you I have a feeling I'm going to be there as well because it's all going to move I think it's going to start moving very, very fast, which is why I'm apprehensive. Let's get into your piece. I do want to go to the military industrial complex, the DOD, and their role in lockdowns, the rollout of the poison jabs and all the things. We're going to do that in a moment. But first, I do want to go over your recent piece because it really does explain in great detail how movements are infiltrated, twisted, and destroyed by operatives, likely from intelligence agencies like the CIA. And before we get started with that, Annie, if you want to pull up the recent interview, speaking of Maha, very interesting, Debbie. We see Callie Means, we see Casey Means, we see Vanahari, the food babe, all of these brand new faces that are the faces of Maha. We don't see Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, Dr. Pierre Corey, Mary Holland. We don't see Dr. Robert Malone, any of the faces, any of the organizers or activists, any of Kevin McKiernan, all of the researchers that have done, Denis Rancourt. I mean, so many names of people who have were in the dark days of 2020, were the underpinning of this movement that really beat back those COVID vaccine mandates and wrestled this nation out of lockdown status. It was that very hard work, and a lot of them severely persecuted, Mary Talley Bowden being one of them. Nowhere to be found at the inauguration, nowhere to be found in the administration. But we do have these new faces. Let's take a look at this video, Annie, of an interview with them defining MAHA. So they're telling us what MAHA is, Debbie. When we come back, I want to get your thoughts on that, and then we'll get into the body of your piece. But Annie, if you could run that, I'd so appreciate it.
How are you guys feeling tonight?
Oh, we're so excited to be here and celebrating everything that we've been working the last several months for, and can't believe it's all coming to fruition finally. Like, we really had a hunch that MAHA could take this campaign over the edge, and I feel confident that it did.
Yes. Alex, you helped me. We did a big story at Daily Wire about how the MAHA movement was really actually exploding and people didn't understand the impact it was going to have. Talk to us about this. Do people underestimate the MAHA movement?
Absolutely. We've created an energy that can't be replicated. We have rising rates of chronic disease that have to be reversed, and we're going to save humanity with this movement.
Amazing. That's amazing. Okay, you guys formed this cohort. You came to D.C. You testified. How did this come about? Was this just an online grassroots movement, or was you?
It was Bobby Kennedy and President Trump talking together for hours about how to cure childhood chronic disease, summoning the voices of Alex and Bonnie and leaders who've been in this fight for so long. Alex's primal scream at the Senate of standing up for moms, that was channeled by President Trump. And the gender gap was supposed to be 20 points, it was 7. President Trump closed the gender gap because he channeled this childhood chronic disease issue with the support of Bobby Kennedy, channeling voices like Alex and Bonnie. Something very spiritual happened during this campaign. And we should all be celebrating that and continue to help President Trump get kids healthy. I mean, it's that simple.
He has a whole cohort of mothers especially, right, who are not technically Republican, but they're aligned on this issue. Is that what you guys would say?
Yeah, so right now I would say the call out to traditional conservatives is okay. We just gained a ton of new female mom voters. How are we going to keep them after these 4 years to continue voting Republican? As a conservative, I obviously have a stake in that. So I'm thinking that MAHA is something that can keep outliving MAGA. MAGA is here, but MAHA can go forever. And I think this is how we can continue to court these female voters.
All right, there's like so much there. I mean, this is basically it's your piece in an interview form. You've got, right, just so you guys know, that was Callie Means at the inauguration. The food babe Vanahari was on the far left of the screen, and the girl in the center was Alex something. I'm not sure which influencer she was, but your initial thoughts on that discourse.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, there's just so much to unpack. It's kind of insane.
Yeah.
None of those people was anywhere that anybody had ever heard of before 2024. And Callie, August 2024. August 2024. That's 6 months. 6 months. Before that, he was an entrepreneur. He had a wedding dress company with his wife and invests in all kinds of psychedelic companies and tracking companies and, all software AI type companies. So absolutely nothing in this guy's life had anything to do with medical freedom or any values that any of us cares about. And now he's going to save the world.
Yeah. And they mentioned we are going to save the world with MAHA. The channeling, he mentioned the word channeling. It's a spiritual movement that a coming together of Donald Trump and RFK, and they're channeling into the Trump administration the MAHA energy. What do you make of that?
So I thought it was super interesting that one of the girls said that MAGA is here, but MAHA is here forever. So that's exactly the point, is that they want to fuse those two things together in order to neutralize what MAHA was. MAHA, again, that's exactly what I mean by saying that MAHA is just a label and it's an organization. It's a political organization. It has nothing to do with freedom, values, democracy, civil rights, human rights, nothing like that. So they're just saying that to us right there. They're just saying, okay, it's a political movement. It's going to take over. We're going to switch the letters from MAGA to MAHA, and that's going to get a lot of more women and mothers in. So that's cool. And that just looking at them, I mean, when you look at the people that you mentioned and all the other millions of people, not, I wish it was millions, but the people who have been working on this for so long, that's not what they look like.
No.
So I know people are going to come back at me and say, why can't we be, young, good looking entrepreneurs and also have these values? We can, one could, but just show me one. Show me one. And also, if we had these values, the values that I am trying to uphold, and I know you are too, Shannon, then that's not what we would be worried about. And we would be worried. And I don't see anybody there who lost anything: reputation, income, job. Everybody in the medical freedom movement, starting long before COVID, the people who were really working on vaccines and injuries to children, all of them suffered massive, massive personal losses because of their work.
Yes.
So that to me is also a sign. Now, people also are going to come back at me and say, well, you don't have to suffer personal loss. No, you don't have to. But if you didn't, then maybe you weren't actually working on the things that the establishment cares about. Maybe you were working on things that the establishment doesn't care about at all.
Right.
Like these people.
Right. We're talking to Debbie Lehrman. Her piece, her Substack piece, is a blockbuster, and it's entitled CIA Central Casting the Means Episode. Who are Casey and Callie Means? Let's get into the body of your work, Debbie, and why you wrote this piece. We touched on this topic, the infiltration of the medical freedom movement with actors who could potentially be linked to intelligence. What did you find? You decided to do a deep dive into these two who made their debut essentially on the Tucker Carlson show. They've only been on the scene for about 6 months. Everyone was talking about, where did these people come from? They have a best-selling book. They land an interview with Tucker Carlson. They land an interview with Joe Rogan. People work their entire careers and they don't have a best-selling book or land these types of interviews. So it makes you wonder, what is the PR effort and apparatus behind these two? But it was, those type of anomalies that made a lot of people suspicious. Debbie, you did the hard work of actually investigating these two, investigating their history and their stories, all of the contradictions in so many of their stories and in so many different areas. And then also the shady past, the very interesting past of their father, Grady Means, which is quite fascinating. I'll let you tell this story as best you can. Long piece, guys, 2 pieces on her Substack. One is the original, then there is a follow-up, all said and done, all printed out, about 20 some pages worth of research, all linked, hyperlinked, sourced. When Debbie researches, she doesn't get it wrong. So this is going to be your definitive look at these individuals. It's important because if you're involved in a medical freedom movement or a freedom movement or any movement whatsoever, we need to be very cognizant of the ways that outsiders can come in and break apart that movement. And we need to do so in a sober way, not afraid of people who have different ideas or opinions than us. But when you have a really clear situation like this, you have to understand it, see it, acknowledge it, so that you can make sure that it's not going to happen again. So without further ado, if you'd like to walk us through your piece and what you found.
Okay, thanks. Great intro. And yeah, first I'm going to just correct you because I really think we all need to be really accurate in how we speak about these things, because what they do is they always speak inaccurately about everything.
Yep.
So I call them the Maha twins because that's sort of how they've been presented. They're actually siblings. So
yes,
Callie is older. So we're just going to call them the Means siblings, or Casey and Callie. And what happened was so I immediately had my spidey sense about them because of their names. I know that's ridiculous. And because of
What about their
the
names?
way
I'm sorry. What about their names? Had you
Casey
like
and Kelly. Okay, so I'm going to go back. When I first started researching COVID, the first thing that I researched in depth was Deborah Birx. And I actually was going to call this article Deborah Birx 2.0, which is really interesting. And you wouldn't think that the old lady, grandmother, scarf lady, who was, standing there at all the COVID briefings, telling us that we weren't allowed to have Thanksgiving. You wouldn't think of her maybe in the same breath as Casey and Callie Means, but they are identical, actually, in terms of their role and their backgrounds. And when I say identical, I mean they're very comparable.
Yeah.
Because what Deborah Birx's job was. So I read her book, and I, before COVID, had literally never read, and when I say literally, I mean that. I had never read a nonfiction book from cover to cover, even in college. I don't like nonfiction. I find it almost always to be poorly written, poorly edited, and that I can usually get the idea in 20 pages and I don't have to read 500 pages.
Right.
But I was at I was writing for Brownstone, and Jeffrey Tucker at Brownstone asked if somebody could review the book. So I read it. When I started reading it, I actually almost fell off my chair because it was so obviously full of lies, cover-ups, strange statements, terrible science, and I thought, wait a minute, this is what nonfiction books are like. It's all just lies, and it just, I could not believe it. And so I wrote a whole series of articles about how she's covering up where she came from. She's covering up how she got the job as the coordinator of the U.S. government's COVID task force. She's spouting absolute garbage science. And that led into everything else that I did. So Deborah Birx was my gateway to understanding that this was not a public health effort, that this was something else, which led me to discovering the National Security Council and the Department of Defense and the whole international thing. But it was Deborah Birx who started it. And so I started to become extremely sensitive to characters and narratives that were sort of dropped in to the landscape, that were picked up everywhere simultaneously.
Right.
And that told a story that was obviously intended, A, to distract from something, and B, to cover something up. So I got really sensitive to that.
Yeah.
Now, as I was researching, I also started reading lots of nonfiction books. Lots of them, the COVID ones, were like just pure propaganda. So I learned who the writers were who were doing propaganda and what their methods were. And I did a big article about Michael Lewis's book about COVID, which was called The Premonition. Now that is a masterful piece of propaganda. I'm not going to go into it. I wrote a huge article about it on Brownstone. And what that taught me was that the CIA and the intelligence agencies have a sense of humor, and they have certain character types that they use, and they really like names like Charity Dean. So Charity Dean is this character in Michael Lewis's book he tells a completely fabricated story about, and she's this young blonde, white, cute girl who he says knew everything about the pandemic before anybody else. And her name is Charity Dean, and I'm sure they looked for that person with that name. Then I discovered that Reality Winner, now this is not related to COVID, but there's a woman named Reality Winner who supposedly was a whistleblower about Russian interference in the 2016 election. She was one of the reasons that Glenn Greenwald, who's somebody who I follow and like, had to leave The Intercept, which is a news organization that he followed. I'm sorry that I'm giving you all these boring details.
No, I'm interested. Yeah.
So Reality Winner is her name. She looks exactly like Charity Dean. She's a young, white, blonde, cute girl.
Right.
And she's dropped into the narrative in a certain way to do certain things. So I started getting sensitive to that. So Casey and Kelly Means, I was like, what? Casey and Kelly Means, okay, that's a psyop right there for
Right.
sure. It's
Right.
so cute. It's so, rolls off the tongue, and you're going to remember it.
It's a
And
little ambiguous. You never know which is which. Like, who's the boy?
that's right.
Who's the girl? They kind of look alike. It's just there's something weird about it. I agree with you.
So so it starts with a sense. And let me tell you another interesting thing that I didn't even put in my articles. Casey's actual name is Paula. So
Casey's the girl,
yeah.
the almost surgeon who just decided to lay down her scalpel and not be a surgeon anymore because she realized the truth after 31 years.
That's
So
right.
Casey is not even really Casey. Her real name is Paula.
Paula Casey
Wow.
Means changed her
Okay.
name. I
Okay.
found the document of her name change. I think it was 2014 or 2016. Now, I'm not
Okay.
sure if that was the beginning of the PSYOP. I think they've been a planned PSYOP for a long time because of their dad. That's all
Okay.
speculation. Okay, so I won't even start with the speculation. I'll just
Okay.
talk about how I started researching. Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead.
Real quick. Leanna Wen and Russell Brand. Are they real? I mean, they scream Russell Brand with the Catholic conversion, and I almost get the sense that he is totally punking me. That it's the fakest thing I've ever seen. And Leanna Wen, guess who talks? The affect. Leanna Wen's affect. You know who she is, right?
Yeah,
She
I
was,
do.
one of the crisis actors, it seems, in the whole COVID lockdown narrative. She was everywhere. Everywhere. Interestingly enough, she was like a bystander during the Boston bombings. Did you know that?
I did not.
So
The Boston bombings are so interesting.
hello, rabbit hole. So Boston bombings. Leanna Wen just happened to be an on the street, doctor who was treating some of the patients in the aftermath of the Boston bombing. And there is like original footage of her, right? So Leanna, Mark Zuckerberg, in one of the clips that I played last week, had a Leanna Wen affect. He talked just like the kind of breathless kind of question. They have a lilt to their voice, and there's there's
There
something
is an affect.
So when you say spidey senses, like I totally get it. That there's just something off.
Is something
Off.
right.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't going to do an article because I don't usually it's really hard because once you start going down the rabbit holes, for me, I get totally obsessive. And I have to tell you, the weeks that I spent researching this were really hard.
Yeah.
I was obsessed. I couldn't sleep. I wasn't a good partner, my poor husband, because I was just so, in the sense that I was constantly agitated. I didn't
Yeah.
want to have meals. I didn't want to do stuff that we usually do together because I was like, oh, I have to work on this article and I have to do this research. Because I really do get obsessed. But the reason that I continue to do it is because I saw that not only was nobody doing it, but people are falling for it. And it's so devastating to watch it happen in real time, Shannon. I mean, we can look back and see what happened in the 60s. We can look back and see what happened in 2016. We can look back and see what happened at the beginning of COVID. All of those things are like, we're looking at history, but now I feel like we're just looking at it happen in real time. So I was compelled, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, to do it. And so the other thing that made me know that something was wrong, aside from their names and their cutesy appearance and their affect, was that I just spent like 2 seconds researching because somebody asked me what I thought about them. And I was like, I don't know. I don't really care, but I'll look it up. And I looked it up and I immediately saw like that he was on the Council of Foreign Relations and that his companies were all, kind of AI surveillance type companies, the ones that he invested in, or weird psychedelic companies. And so I knew it. I mean, I actually had little doubt that there was something wrong. And I thought everybody would know it and wouldn't have to show everybody that was the case. But then I said, okay, well, I obviously have to show everybody that this is the case. So I need to get the receipts. So what I did was I listened to hours and hours of interviews. And when I listened to the Tucker Carlson interview, again, because I listened to it the first time, everybody was sending it around. This is great. This is great. These people are great. I don't know if you remember.
I
In
do.
August of 2024, people were sending it around like this was the greatest thing to happen to the medical freedom movement ever. And I had listened to it then, and I'd said, uh, they're not really saying anything. But okay, I mean, they're saying stuff that it's true. The medical system is terrible and it's broken and it treats us as body parts and the incentives are all for us to be sick. Everything they're saying about that is true. And I can tell you that my husband, who was a doctor for 15 years, has been saying that for 15, 20 years already. And so
Right.
is everybody who has any insight or knowledge at all of the medical system. The food system we've been talking about since the 60s or 70s. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, you guys are all excited about it. I'm not really that excited about it. I listened to it again. And that's when I had the Deborah Birx moment. Because that's when I saw that they were covering up intentionally something and trying to distract our attention into something else. And
Yep.
it always starts the person's background and qualifications. So with Deborah Birx, there's a whole convoluted, incomprehensible story about how she became the task force coordinator. And it goes through just a whole bunch of things that are contradictory and lies, and tries to incorporate Matt Pottinger, who's actually a CIA guy, who's the one who brought her in. But why? Because of his wife, because she worked with, anyway, the whole background story is really important. And right off the bat, I could see that Tucker and Callie and Casey were telling all kinds of stories about their background that were clearly either exaggerated or false, had internal contradictions. And so I said, okay, yeah, it's true. Something's definitely off. And so then I listened to that whole thing more than once, to the Joe Rogan 3 hours, to the 3.5 hours on the, what's his name? The Danny Jones podcast, the one that was with Jack Cruz and Mary Bowden.
Wow.
Where they tried to confront him. Unfortunately, I didn't think they did a good job, but he did end up tripping up a lot. So it was good. They did trip him up a lot.
Yes.
But listening to all those podcasts and earlier ones that they had done and earlier ones that Callie had done in I believe it's the Tucker podcast, or maybe it's the Joe Rogan podcast, or maybe it's I think it's actually the Danny Jones podcast.
Okay, that's fine.
Callie says that when RFK talked about him in his speech, Callie was not happy because he had wanted the information to go. He was going to take it to his grave, and the information that he was going to take to his grave was his role in brokering the RFK Trump deal. That was 2 hours after the assassination attempt in Butler, PA on Donald Trump. 2 hours. He was still in the hospital. Callie Means called him. Now, I didn't know that. I didn't know any of that. I heard him mention RFK's speech, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go listen to that speech. I went and listened to that speech, which I had never listened to the whole way through. It's really long. It's like 50 minutes.
Yep.
And everybody I talk to now says, yeah, I didn't notice. I didn't hear that. I had a fall off my chair moment when I listened to that speech. I started saying, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, out loud. My husband was in the other room. He's like, who are you talking to? I said, this is another Deborah Birx. I can't believe that this is happening.
Yeah.
Because what happens in that RFK speech is that for 25 minutes, the first 25 minutes, he talks like RFK Jr. and he says what he really thinks about what's happening in the country, the censorship, the war in Ukraine, the loss of democracy and civil liberties. He talks about his uncle and his dad like he always does.
Right.
At minute 25, which is the exact midpoint of the speech, so the speech is 50 minutes, at minute 25, all of a sudden he says, and on the night that Trump was shot, I got a call from Callie Means. He says the name Callie Means. Nobody knows who this is. This is a nationally televised, probably the most important speech in his life. You noticed.
I listened to that speech. I was driving with my kids to Red Creek out in the country to visit our grandparents. And so I stuck my earbud. I'm like, I got to listen to this thing because, and when he mentioned this guy, I'm like, who the hell is Callie Means? And how did this guy, get access to Trump in his, the day he was assassinated or the attempted assassination, right? So I just want to say, I shared, like when I heard that, I was immediately like, please,
good
please,
for you, because
to affirm you.
and nobody else noticed. When everybody who read my article said they didn't notice it, when I talked to people, they didn't notice it. Anyway, I hadn't even listened to it. So I was like floored. So he says Callie means call me. Not only that, he says, and Callie means is possibly the leading advocate for food safety, soil regeneration, and ending the chronic disease epidemic. Okay? Not a leading, the leading for these things that he's never ever talked about. Soil regeneration is the one that actually made me laugh, because Callie had said like maybe 3 words about soil regeneration in his entire life. Okay. Right. And RFK, this is the most important, or one of the most important speeches of his life. He's giving up his run for the presidency. He's throwing his support behind somebody who he has always pretty much reviled, I would say.
His wife said she'd divorce him. He said, I'll never join the Trump campaign. My wife will divorce me if I join the Trump. Remember that statement? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's causing a lot of turmoil for him. And now he's talking about this guy nobody knows, giving false credentials for this guy, right? So the credentials are key.
Right.
And then says, I recommend that you listen to the Tucker Carlson podcast with Casey and Callie Means. He literally recommends a specific podcast. Who does that in the speech where they're quitting their presidential run?
And those would be called talking points, Debbie, as a seasoned professional podcaster. Those would be called sources and talking points, right? Like, yeah, exactly like that. You're identifying the call to action, so to speak. Like, this is a market, and you have a mission, and the mission is to introduce this product, aka Callie Means, to this movement, the medical freedom movement, and direct them to where it is they're supposed to go in order to be properly propagandized into what the new movement is, which is Maha.
You just said it. That's exactly the mechanism. Yeah. Now, he says, go to their podcast, and Casey Means, who, by the way, he hadn't mentioned because he had only given Callie's background. Casey Means, who was the top graduate in her class at Stanford Medical School. Not true. So he said 2 false things about 2 people that nobody knew. He didn't have to mention them in his huge speech, and let alone say false things about them. So something's very, very wrong.
Type in Maha for your 10% discount on their book, right? Like that's all you need to know. That's what's coming in next, right?
I mean,
unbelievable.
But for him to then I started. So that is what made me really sad, because there's 2 possibilities. Either RFK was doing it willingly because he thought strategically that they could help him somehow, or he was doing it because he had to, for whatever reason. Because I don't think in either case that would be a natural progression of this particular speech. Now, after he said those things about the Meanses, that's not even the end. And this I didn't even put in my article because it's just, there's too many things. The speech progresses to actually almost verbatim quote about a 5 to 10 minute segment from the Tucker Carlson interview. So he falsely identifies their qualifications. He recommends the podcast, and then he quotes the podcast for like 5 to 10 minutes about how 71% of people have prediabetes, and 30% of kids have this, and 80% of us have that, and the chronic disease epidemic, and blah blah blah.
And I'm listening to it thinking vaccines, COVID vaccines. I'm sitting there, I'm waiting. And then that was my omitted from that list of all the things that are harming children, hurting children, creating chronic disease. The big omission was the vaccines or the shots.
Right. Which I'm actually fine with. See, that's the funny thing. Like if he was going to be strategic in this speech, or in his political career. And he didn't want to mention vaccines in his big speeches. Okay. That's not even what got my, that didn't make me suspicious at all. It's the way that his relationship with the Callie and Casey. So, so I listened to the speech. Then I go and I start reading about what actually happened on the night of July 13th, 2024, when Trump was shot and in the hospital in Butler, PA, and then there's a New York Times article. And the New York Times article came out in the first week of September. I have a theory that I didn't put in my article because it's just a theory, and I'll tell you what it is because I know you like theories. So it's possible that the New York Times article says that they interviewed over 20 people, and the New York Times article, as all legacy media about Trump and about the alt-right and whatever, they have their agenda. And so they do research in a certain way in order to show that the Trump transition was very chaotic and it was full of all kinds of quacks. And it was done in a very stupid way, and it wasn't done methodically. And, the people who were involved were just all kinds of random people. And because they have that agenda, they let out things that the deep state doesn't want to have let out. Right?
Love
they
it.
make mistakes. It's
Yeah,
hilarious.
I love it. Yes,
it's
I love
hilarious.
It. Okay.
Because their agenda suddenly is a little bit out of alignment with the deep state agenda, and so they're revealing secrets that they're not supposed to.
Okay.
I think they started researching this story the night after, once it was announced that. Or they got wind that Trump and RFK Jr. were talking, and they interviewed 20 people. I think that the people who were orchestrating it got wind of the article and said, oh my God, the New York Times is going to come out and say that Callie Means orchestrated this thing, but nobody's ever heard of him. And so they're going to get really suspicious about who Callie Means is and who orchestrated it. We need to run a massive, very fast PR campaign to explain why Callie Means is the one who brokered this deal. Why he was able to call RFK, call Trump, and call Tucker Carlson, like all within like 3 seconds, and get the whole thing going. And so we have to do that really fast. So we have to put him on Tucker. We have to put him on, as many places as possible. We have to have RFK explain why this guy, that he's been working for his campaign from the beginning, which RFK said in the speech, which Callie denied, which RFK contradicted in another podcast. So they're all contradicting each other constantly. And I think it's because, if we take my theory, because they had to run this PR campaign so fast. And so they had to change things, and they had to say things, and they didn't have the narrative locked down the way that they needed to have it locked down. And so there were a lot of holes in the narrative. So that brings us to the RFK Callie podcast, which is very, very problematic. It's from September 7th. So that's only 2 weeks after after his speech. And he says things like, this is Callie Means, and he reads off some qualifications, and he says, I'm embarrassed to say I had never heard of you until the Tucker Carlson podcast. This is a week after the podcast. Now, an article comes out, and I forget if it's in the Wall Street Journal or another publication, explaining that actually it wasn't that podcast that he meant. He meant the podcast that Tucker had with Callie back in February 2nd, 2024. There was a Tucker Callie podcast. Was that ever mentioned in the August podcast? Like, hey, great to have you back again. We had such a good talk about Ozempic back in February. Oh, and by the way, I also interviewed you on Fox News back in 2023 when you told me about the whole Coke scandal with the NAACP that you keep repeating as if you were there and as if it's news. It happened in 2013. I found like multiple media reports on this story from 2013. This is a non-story. It's a complete.
It was clearly to drive some type of legislative agenda. It seemed to me some type of legislative or political agenda to kind of drag up that story again, and then or maybe it was to ingratiate Tucker's audience to him as a contributor. It doesn't make sense to me as to why they would bring up. I mean, and so, what Debbie's pointing to, there were two appearances. I mean, they act as if Callie and Casey Mean came out, were these brand new medical freedom people, and wow, your book is revolutionary and what you're doing is revolutionary. But Callie had already been on the Tucker Carlson show on this weird story about the NCAA.
That was actually on Fox News. So NAACP. So on Fox News in 2023, there was a little segment about how Callie, so they like to present him as a food lobbyist or a pharma lobbyist. What they try to do is they try to give him, again, this is a credential thing. The false credentials is a big, big tell.
Yeah.
He worked for these two giant consulting PR and lobbying firms right out of college before he went to business school. Okay, so he was a junior employee. Unless his dad got him really high positions, that's possible. But he was only there for 2 years at each one of these firms between 2008 and 2013. So anyone who calls him a food lobbyist or a consultant to the food companies or a consultant to the pharma companies is absolutely exaggerating, if not completely falsely stating or misstating his credentials, because that's something he did for 4 years after college. It wasn't his career. I doubt that he was in any of the rooms that he said he was in, but let's just pretend that he was.
Right.
And he's telling stories about things that we already know. And then Tucker Carlson has a huge label on the top of the screen. When you see them, it's kind of, they do it really fast now so that you won't see it. But it says, big pharma whistleblowers is what he calls them. Whistleblowers.
No.
Whistleblowers lose their jobs, are vilified and often murdered.
Yeah.
If they actually whistleblow something real.
Right.
And nothing that Callie and Casey do is even remotely adjacent to whistleblowing.
Yeah, we're talking to Debbie Lerman, the full piece, 2 full pieces on her Substack. If you want to go in, it reads like a spy novel. Really great presentation, Debbie. So I want to encourage all of you to get the timeline and read the full articles. Callie Casey means sibling duo. Their dad Grady means. In a subsequent piece, Debbie lays out how he is absolutely tethered to the administrative state or the political apparatus in Washington, D.C., as far back as being an assistant to Nelson Rockefeller for many years. And he was involved. Currently, he holds multiple patents on drone technology and drone surveillance technology that he'll likely cash in on if we have, the emergence of the tech state, under a Trump administration. So that's the patriarch. That's the dad Grady, which would explain the opening of doors to Callie and Casey to all of these areas of influence. And the siblings grew up in Washington, D.C. as well. And I'm kind of rushing through this a little bit, Debbie, because we only have about 4 minutes left in the show. So I kind of want to get the big picture. And we'll have you again to talk about the military-industrial complex and the DoD and international NATO involvement in the rollout of the COVID lockdowns and also the shots, because that is an important element. Your thesis, your larger thesis here, and I want to give you the full 5 or so minutes as we wind down the show to kind of explain this, is that what we are witnessing in the medical freedom movement with the creation of MAHA, the brand around Callie and Casey Means, and then all of the people around that brand who are now cashing in on all of the platforming, all of the money. They're in the pipeline with the administration, the influencer class, Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan. It's now a big money-making machine. It's all about food, nothing about lockdowns, forgetting, casting that into the ash heap of, the dustbin of history, right? We don't even talk about that anymore. And your thesis here, and this is a hunch, is that this is an intelligence operation, that these two were placed to do this specifically. Can you kind of give us an overview of that larger thesis and why you think it's the case?
Yeah. So the narrative, I learned during COVID that what the deep state, which is the public-private partnerships that are in charge, that include the military-industrial complex, but are not exclusively the military-industrial complex, they when they need to control the narrative. And so one of the ways of controlling the narrative is to take something that's happening, but say that it's been happening for a really long time and that there are causes for it that are just so huge and so general that we really need to address these huge general things and not look at anything very specific or very local to the timeline. So they stretch the timeline out and they blur the causal relationships between what's happening. Now, starting in 2021, I saw it happening with vaccine injuries and deaths. Starting in 2021, they started putting out totally bogus medical journal articles, and I can show you them and I can tell you the doctors who wrote them, about how COVID causes all these things, the myocarditis and the heart problems and autoimmune diseases and infertility.
Right.
First, they started saying that it was COVID.
Yeah.
Then what the means are doing, which is a continuation of that, and there sort of have been a shift over to this, is that actually there is a chronic disease epidemic. So when people say that the means are talking about food and that's the problem, that's not the problem. It's not the food that's it's not them talking about the food that's the problem. It's them talking about the chronic disease epidemic. Listen to the words epidemic, right? Okay, so there was a pandemic that caused a lot of horrible things that we are all fighting about and that we're all upset about. But no, it's not that pandemic that we should be worried about. It's the chronic disease epidemic. It's been going on for decades. We're in a toxic stew of toxic chemicals in our food, in our environment, and that's what's causing all of these things. And then they'll tell you 2024 was the year with the highest incidence of heart disease, cancer, autoimmune disease, infertility. And why? Because it's been going on for 30 years, Shannon, 40 years, 50 years, not because of anything that's happened in the last 4 years, God forbid. That's why. That's the narrative.
Annie,
Now,
to piggyback on that, they will present government solutions because it's an epidemic, because it's a crisis.
Yes.
To RFK's point, they need to now declare an emergency.
Yes.
Issue executive orders because it's an epidemic, right?
Right. And instead of, because what is our first priority? I can tell you, people who write lists of what if we really were going to follow the medical freedom agenda, the day one, RFK being the head of HHS would revoke EUA, PrEP Act, and all emergency declarations.
Right.
Number one, that would solve the problem.
Number
It would
one.
solve the problem. So, but no, we need more government action, more emergency declarations, more surveillance, and more interventions. So that's how they cover it up, dilute it, and distract us from it. Now, you said at the beginning, you made the introduction about how they are infiltrating the actual movement, and I call it a civil rights movement. I was talking to Warner Mendenhall, who's a really wonderful lawyer who's doing a lot of COVID work, he said, that COVID was the biggest civil rights violations in our history since Jim Crow, and it is a civil rights, the most egregious civil rights violations of the entire citizenry, not just of the country, but of all democratic countries in the world. And so our movement, which was the anti-lockdown, like you said, and the medical freedom movement, is also a civil rights movement. It's like we have righteous anger about how civil rights have been violated, the Hippocratic Oath and bodily autonomy and all of that.
Yeah.
And to subvert it, they need to turn it into something much more general, much more long-term, much less focused, and much more personal health related. Like Callie and Casey's book is basically just a self-help book about how you can eat healthy and monitor your glucose continually.
Using one of their products, using one of the products that their multiple corporations will sell to you, which is
exactly.
Debbie.
So they have to dissipate the righteous anger and the righteous rage of the civil uprising that is the medical freedom movement since COVID, and they have to turn it into something that's corporate, something that's addressing some long-term problems that have been here forever, and something that's not threatening the stability of the establishment. And that's exactly what they're doing. And that's what they did in the 60s.
Yeah. Well, and most importantly, something that must be solved immediately by the federal government, and subjugating Americans more and more, right? Like you have to have the solutions, right, that are put in place, and whether that's surveillance, digital ID. I mean, who knows what they'll come up with next. And you rightly point out the civil rights movement of the '60s, which was co-opted and twisted into the free love and that kind of the psychedelic aspect of it. I have to have you in again because the fact that they are so heavily invested in these psychedelic companies, and I'm seeing all this psychedelic stuff on reality TV, and I'm seeing signals about all of this that they're trying to kind of push this is really strange.
Yep.
Really, really strange. Debbie
Yep.
Lerman, please go and read the full series of pieces. There are 2 full ones at Debbie's Substack. And really quickly, 30 seconds before I let you go, how can people find you, support you, and help you?
My Substack, it's just debbielerman.substack.com. On Brownstone, my articles are just under Debbie Lerman at brownstone.com. And mainly just please, I know that since you're listening to Shannon, you're not falling for the hopium, but let's all stand together because this is what gives me hope is being with you, Shannon, and knowing that you have so many people who understand what's happening. And we just need to have as many people understand as possible.
Yes, we need to protect this movement, and we're going to have to, as David Icke said, be highly vigilant and streetwise. Jesus said, be wise as serpents and gentle as doves, right? Like this is where we need to be. We can't be fools. Debbie Lerman, we're going to be following everything you're doing over at Substack, and we're going to have you on again sooner rather than later to go into this in a little more detail because this is a really important topic. People need to understand it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shannon. I really appreciate it.
Yes. And thank you guys for being with us today on the Shannon Joy Show. Thank you to Annie for producing the show. I know we went a little late today. Thank you to our sponsors, Colonial Metals Group. That's colonialmetalsgroup.com/joy. If you use the promo code JOY, you'll get a free safe or qualify for up to $10,000 in free silver. You guys are amazing. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow to do it all again right here on the Shannon Joy Show.
Shannon, can you hear me?